I remember exactly what the weather was like that morning. Cold, gray, the kind of morning where the sky looks like it can't decide what it wants to do. I drove into the parking lot of Callaway Industrial Solutions the same way I had for 9 years. Same route, same exit, same spot near the side entrance. I had my coffee. I had my bag. I had no idea that in about 3 hours, everything I'd spent almost a decade building was going to be taken from me in a 12-minute meeting. The calendar invite came at 8:47 in the morning. It said quick sync. That was it. No agenda. No description. Just my name, Dennis Callaway's name, and his son Ryan's name. Conference room B, 14th floor, 11 a.m. I want to tell you, I had a good feeling about it. I didn't. You work somewhere long enough, you start to feel things before they happen. Not in a dramatic way, just a quiet knowing. A tightness in your chest that you can't quite explain. I felt it the second I saw that invite. I walked into that conference room at 10:59. Dennis was already seated at the head of the table. Ryan was to his right. They were not talking when I walked in. They were just sitting there. Dennis had a folder in front of him. Ryan had nothing in front of him. He was just sitting there with his hands folded like he was waiting for a flight. I sat down across from them. Dennis looked at me. He said, "Marcus, thanks for coming." Like I had a choice. Like this was optional. He didn't waste much time. I'll give him that. He opened the folder, pulled out a single sheet of paper, and slid it across the table toward me. It was an org chart. Our division. The operations division of Callaway Industrial Solutions. I had built that division from 4 people to a team of 22. I had grown it over 9 years into the backbone of the entire company. And right there at the top of that org chart, where my name had always been, was Ryan Callaway, Director of Operations. Ryan Callaway. And below him, one box down, in smaller text, Senior Advisor. Marcus Hale. Not director, not manager, advisor. Like I was some kind of consultant they brought in twice a year to look at spreadsheets. Dennis said, "We think it's time to bring in some fresh energy at the top." I looked at the org chart. I looked at Dennis. I looked at Ryan. Ryan didn't say a word. He just gave me a small nod, like he was acknowledging a transaction, like this was just a thing that was happening and my feelings about it were not really part of the conversation. I asked one question. I kept my voice completely flat. I said, "Is this final?" Dennis said, "Yes." I nodded. I picked up the org chart. I set it back down on the table. I stood up. I told them both I appreciated their time, and I walked out of that conference room. I did not slam the door. I did not raise my voice. I did not say anything sharp or dramatic. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button, rode down my floor, sat at my desk, and stared at my screen for about 4 minutes without doing anything. And then I thought, 9 years. 9 years of staying late. 9 years of covering problems before they became crises. 9 years of holding that place together in ways nobody ever fully saw or measured. 9 years of salary reviews where Dennis told me the numbers were tight. 9 years of doing the work of a man who should have been earning significantly more and carrying a much bigger title. 9 years, and it ended with a piece of paper slid across a conference table. 12 minutes. No explanation beyond fresh energy. And a 31-year-old who had never shipped a single order sitting across from me with his hands folded, waiting for me to accept it. My name is Marcus Hale. I'm 47 years old. I spent nearly a decade of my career giving everything I had to a company that decided, in the end, that the owner's last name mattered more than everything I had actually done. I didn't quit that day. I want to be clear about that. I sat back down at my desk. I answered my emails. I took 2 calls that afternoon. I did my job, but something shifted the moment I walked out of that room. Something quiet and permanent. I stopped thinking about the company's future, and I started thinking about mine. Let me tell you what I actually did there, because it matters. It matters for everything that comes later. I came up the hard way in this industry. I didn't go to a prestigious school. I have a business administration degree from a mid-sized state university, the kind of school that doesn't impress anyone at a cocktail party. I started my career on a warehouse floor at 24 years old, counting inventory, loading trucks, learning the rhythms of how things actually move from one place to another. I worked my way into logistics coordination, then supply chain management, then operations leadership. By the time I walked into Callaway Industrial Solutions, I had 23 years of real hands-on experience under my belt. I joined Callaway 9 years ago when the company was in rough shape. Not collapse-level trouble, but the kind of slow bleed that kills a business over time if nobody fixes it. They were losing clients. Delivery windows were being missed regularly. Their vendor contracts were a mess. They were paying too much for too little because nobody had ever sat down and actually renegotiated. Dennis hired me as an operations manager because someone told him I was good at cleaning up situations like that. They were right. Within the first 2 years, I renegotiated 3 major vendor contracts and saved the company a significant amount of money annually. I cut fulfillment errors by 34%. That means that more than 1 out of every 3 mistakes we used to make simply stopped happening. 2 clients who had left the company before I arrived, who had walked out the door because of miscommitments and poor service, I brought them back. Both of them. I called them personally. I laid out exactly what had changed, and I earned their trust back. I also built the department's internal tracking system, not with expensive enterprise software, with a process, a clear, disciplined, step-by-step process that every person on my team learned, used, and followed every single day. It wasn't fancy, but it worked. And it worked consistently, which is the only thing that actually matters in logistics. I hired the people on that team, almost every single one of them. I interviewed them. I trained them. I sat with them during their first weeks and showed them exactly how we did things and why. When they deserved raises, I fought for those raises. When they made mistakes, I addressed it directly and fairly. When they did something right, I made sure they knew I saw it. That team became one of the most reliable operations units in our region, and it happened because of the people and the process, not because of luck or a good market. The department grew from 4 people to 22 under my leadership. The company grew alongside it, and there was one client that mattered more than all the others: Meridian Manufacturing, a $4.2 million annual account. The kind of account that, if you lose it, people notice. Meridian's VP of procurement was a woman named Sandra Okafor. She was sharp, direct, and had zero patience for excuses. She had a simple standard: do what you said you were going to do when you said you were going to do it every single time. Sandra had my direct number, not the company's main line, not our customer service queue. My number. When something came up, a delay, a question, a concern, she called me. Not because the company told her to, but because she trusted me specifically. That relationship had taken years to build, and it was built on one thing: I never let her down. For 9 years of all of that, I was being paid $94,000 a year. No equity, no profit sharing, no bonus structure that ever actually paid out in any meaningful way. Just a salary that had moved very slowly over nearly a decade, while the value I was delivering grew considerably year after year. I am not telling you this to complain. I understood the deal. I knew what I'd signed up for. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand exactly what was sitting on one side of that conference table when Dennis slid that org chart across to me. 23 years of experience, 9 years of loyalty, a department built from almost nothing, a $4.2 million client relationship held together by a personal phone call, 34% fewer errors, 2 recovered clients, 22 people trained and led. That's what was on my side of the table. I want to be fair about Ryan. I have thought about this a lot since everything happened, and I made a decision early on that I was not going to turn him into something he wasn't. He was not a monster. He was not a cruel person. He never screamed at anyone. He never openly disrespected me to my face. If you met him at a dinner or a networking event, you would probably think he was fine, polished, confident, easy to talk to. But there is a difference between being a decent person and being qualified for a job. And Ryan Callaway was not qualified for the job his father gave him. Not even close. He had an MBA from a program that I will not name, but let's say it was not the kind of school that gets mentioned when people talk about top business programs. He had worked for 2 years at a management consulting firm before coming to Callaway. From what I could piece together during his time with us, his work there had mostly involved building presentation decks, sitting in on client calls, and writing summaries of meetings that other people ran. That was his professional foundation. He arrived at Callaway Industrial Solutions in a company-leased Range Rover. That was his first week. He wore clothes that I later found out cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Not because I was paying close attention to his wardrobe, but because one of the admins mentioned it one afternoon and I did the math. He walked the floor with the easy confidence of someone who had never been told he was wrong about anything that actually mattered. In team meetings, he asked questions that made it clear he did not understand the basics of what we did. He once used the terms carrier contract and freight broker agreement interchangeably during a meeting, and I could see two of my most experienced team members exchange a look across the table. Those are not the same thing. They operate under completely different legal and financial structures, and confusing them is the kind of mistake a first-year logistics coordinator learns to avoid in their first month. I corrected him gently. He nodded and moved on. I don't think he fully understood the correction. But the moment that I think about most, the one that made everything completely clear to me, happened about 6 weeks after the org chart meeting. We had a vendor escalation call. One of our part suppliers was threatening to pull out of a critical contract. It was not the first time I had dealt with a situation like this. Suppliers do this. Sometimes they mean it. Sometimes they are testing you to see if you will give them better terms out of panic. This supplier was bluffing. I knew it. I had worked with them for 4 years. I knew their margins, I knew their alternatives, and I knew they did not have a better buyer lined up. If we held firm and showed no desperation, they would back down within a week. I walked Ryan through exactly what to say on that call. I was specific. I told him, do not offer a price concession. Hold the line. Be professional but firm. Ryan got on that call, and within 8 minutes, he offered the supplier a pricing adjustment that cost our company $180,000. The supplier accepted immediately. Of course they did. Ryan hung up and looked at me like he had just defused a bomb. He said, I think that went well. And I sat there completely still and said, yes. Because what else was I going to say in that moment? I wrote it down that night. The date, the call, the number, the outcome. That was the beginning of my documentation. And it was the clearest possible picture of what the next chapter of Callaway Industrial Solutions was going to look like with Ryan Callaway running operations. I stayed. I know some people will hear this story and wonder why I didn't walk out the day Dennis showed me that org chart. The answer is simple, and it has nothing to do with pride or stubbornness. My daughter, Alicia, was finishing her second year of college. Her tuition was $22,000 a year. My wife, Carol, had been dealing with a health issue the year before. Nothing life-threatening, but serious enough that she had cut back to part-time work while she recovered. We had a mortgage. We had monthly obligations. I could not afford a gap in income, not even a short one. So I made a decision. I would stay. I would do my job. I would not sabotage anything. I would not create drama. And I would not burn anything down on my way out. But I would also keep my eyes open, and I would document everything I saw. Those 3 months were some of the most quietly painful of my professional life. Not because anyone was cruel to me, but because I had to sit there every single day and watch someone systematically undo things that had taken years to build, and do it with complete confidence, as if the results of the last 9 years had happened by accident. The first change Ryan made that I knew would cause real problems was the vendor check-in schedule. We had always done weekly check-ins with our key suppliers. Phone calls, status updates, early warning on any potential delays. It was not glamorous work, but it was the reason we almost never got surprised by a problem. We caught things early, when they were still small enough to fix. Ryan changed it to bi-weekly. He said it would save administrative hours. He put together a short presentation with a slide that showed how much time would be recovered across the team. It looked reasonable on paper if you had never actually run operations. If you had, you knew immediately what was going to happen. 6 weeks later, 2 of our vendors missed delivery windows in the same month. Not because the vendors had changed, because we stopped checking in frequently enough to catch the warning signs before they became missed deadlines. I had seen those exact warning signs in prior years and caught them every single time because we were talking to those vendors every week. I documented both incidents: dates, vendors, delivery windows, impact to clients. The second change was the reporting format. Ryan restructured how the team logged and reported daily operations. He replaced our format with something that looked like a template from his old consulting firm. It was cleaner. It was easier to read at the executive level. and it removed almost all of the field-level detail that my team had used for years to catch problems before they escalated. It was like taking the gauges out of a cockpit and replacing them with a single screen that just said everything fine, right up until it wasn't. I sent Ryan a memo, a real one, 3 pages, specific, respectful in tone, laying out exactly what the format change was removing and why that detail mattered. I cited specific examples from the past where that field-level information had allowed us to prevent client-facing problems. He replied in 2 lines. He said the new system was directionally correct and that I should trust the process. I requested a private meeting with Dennis. I thought if I could sit down with him one-on-one, away from Ryan, I could help him understand what was happening at the operational level before it started affecting clients. Dennis met with me for about 20 minutes. He listened. He nodded in the right places. And then he told me to give Ryan room to grow. Give Ryan room to grow. I drove home that evening and sat in my car in the driveway for about 10 minutes before going inside. Meanwhile, I kept my documentation going. Every process change, every new directive, every incident that resulted from those changes, every date and detail stored on my personal laptop at home, not on the company system, mine. And I kept my relationship with Sandra Okafor intact, carefully. She had started noticing things. Her calls to me were being rerouted. When she reached out to the operations department, she was getting Ryan's assistant instead of me. Ryan had made a quiet structural change that positioned him as the primary contact for all major accounts. On paper, that made sense for someone in his role. In practice, it meant that the person our most important client trusted most was no longer her first point of contact. Sandra called me directly one afternoon, on my cell, not through the office. She said, "Marcus, I don't know what's happening over there, but I hope you're not going anywhere." I told her I was still there. For now. She heard the "for now." I could tell by the pause before she said anything else. Those 2 words carried more information than I had intended to give. But I didn't take them back. Because they were true, the meeting was called on a Thursday morning. All hands. Every member of the operations team, all 22 of them, plus Ryan, plus Dennis. That alone told me something was coming. Dennis almost never came to department meetings. He had stopped doing that years ago, once he trusted me to run things. The fact that he was in that room, standing near the back wall with his arms crossed, meant this was not a routine update. Ryan stood at the front of the room. He had a printed handout this time. He called it a strategic restructuring initiative. He talked for about 10 minutes about efficiency, about evolving the team's structure to match the company's growth goals, about positioning the department for the next phase. He used the word optimize 4 times. I counted, and then he got to the part that mattered. 3 positions were being eliminated, effective at the end of the month. He read the names. I will not share all of them here, but I knew every single one, because I had hired every single one of them. I had interviewed them, trained them, and fought for their salary reviews. They were not the newest members of the team. They were 3 of the most experienced people on the floor. The 3rd name he read was Gerald Sims. Gerald had been with Callaway for 6 years. He was 58 years old. He knew our systems better than almost anyone. He was the kind of person who showed up 15 minutes early and never had to be told something twice. He was also, and this is the part that hit me hardest, 2 years away from being fully eligible for the company's legacy pension plan. 2 years. After 6 years of showing up and doing everything right. Ryan's stated reason for the eliminations was efficiency optimization. Streamlining headcount in areas where the new reporting structure had reduced the need for senior-level floor oversight. I knew the real reason. All 3 of those people had pushed back on Ryan's changes. Not loudly, not disrespectfully, but they had asked the kinds of questions that exposed the problems in his decisions. They had been loyal to the way we had built the department, and that loyalty made them inconvenient. So they were gone. I sat through the rest of that meeting without saying a word. I watched my team absorb the news. Some of them looked at the floor. Some of them looked at me. I kept my face calm. I nodded once or twice as Ryan finished speaking. And when it was over and people started filing out, I waited. I caught Dennis near the door before he could leave. I asked for 2 minutes. He gave them to me, reluctantly, stepping just outside into the hallway. I kept my voice low and direct. I said, "Dennis, I need you to hear me clearly. You are about to lose Meridian." He looked at me the way people look at someone they have already decided not to listen to. A patient, slightly tired expression. He told me that Ryan had already reached out to Sandra Okafor's office to schedule a relationship-building lunch. I looked at him and I said, "Sandra doesn't want a lunch. She wants her orders to arrive on time." Dennis straightened slightly. He told me I was being resistant to change, that the company was evolving and that my role was to support that evolution, not fight it. I did not argue. There was nothing left to argue. I thanked him for his time, and I walked to the elevator. That was the moment. Not dramatic. No raised voices. No ultimatums delivered in a hallway. Just a quiet, permanent shift inside me that I felt as clearly as anything I have ever felt in my professional life. I had spent 9 years protecting that company, covering problems before they became disasters, staying late when no one asked me to, keeping clients happy with my own credibility when the company's systems weren't good enough to do it on their own. I had done all of that because I believed in what we were building and because I thought that kind of loyalty meant something. Standing in that hallway, I understood finally that it didn't. Not to them. I drove home that evening and I told Carol I was going to resign. She put down what she was doing and looked at me for a moment. Then she asked when. I said, "Not yet. When the time is right." She nodded. She didn't push for more. After 21 years of marriage, she knew what that meant. It meant I already had a plan forming. It meant I was done being patient for their benefit. From that point forward, I was only being patient for mine. I gave myself 3 weeks. Not because I needed that long emotionally, I was already done, but because I needed that long practically. There were things I wanted to have in place before I handed in my resignation, and I was not going to rush any of them. The first thing I did was reach out to a former colleague named Paul Driscoll. Paul and I had worked together about 12 years earlier at a regional distribution company. He had built a strong career since then and was now running operations at a firm called Vantage Supply Partners. We had stayed in loose contact over the years, the occasional message, a few industry events. I reached out and told him I was exploring options. He called me back within a day. What started as an informal conversation turned into a structured interview within a week. I met with Paul and 2 members of their leadership team. I walked them through my background, what I had built at Callaway, and what I was looking for going forward. They moved quickly. Within 10 days of my first call to Paul, I had an offer in writing. Director of Operations, $127,000 a year. That was $33,000 more than I had been making, for a title that actually reflected what I had been doing for nearly a decade. I signed the offer letter on a Sunday evening at my kitchen table. Carol was sitting across from me. I didn't make a big deal out of it. I just signed it, set the pen down, and said, "Okay." She reached across and put her hand on mine for a moment. That was enough. The second thing I did was prepare a full transition document for Callaway. I want to be clear about why I did this, because it was not out of generosity or lingering loyalty. I did it because I am a professional and because I wanted there to be no possible version of events where anyone could say I left the company unprepared. Every vendor contact, every client protocol, every process my team followed, written out in detail, every standing agreement, every escalation path, every exception we handled and how we handled it. I spent parts of 3 evenings putting that document together. It was thorough. If someone with real operations experience sat down with that document, they could have stepped into my role with a clear picture of how everything worked. Whether Ryan or anyone else at Callaway would actually use it correctly was not my responsibility. My responsibility was to make sure it existed. I protected myself legally and professionally, and I left nothing behind that could be used against me. The third thing I did was call Sandra Okafor. I want to be very precise about what that call was and what it was not. It was not a recruitment call. I did not suggest she follow me to Vantage or imply that her account would be better served elsewhere. I did not say a negative word about Callaway, about Dennis, or about Ryan. I called her because she had given 9 years of her trust to me personally, and she deserved to hear from me directly that I was moving on. Not from a transition email. Not from an assistant. From me. She was quiet for a moment after I told her. Then she said, "Marcus, wherever you land, call me." That was all. We said goodbye, and I hung up. I filed my resignation on a Tuesday morning. A clean letter. 2 weeks' notice. Professional in every sentence. I sent it to Dennis by email and placed a printed copy on his assistant's desk. Ryan received a copy. He said almost nothing. He nodded when he passed me in the hallway later that day, the same way he had nodded in that conference room months earlier. Like it was just another transaction. Dennis called me into his office that afternoon. He asked if this was really what I wanted. I told him yes. He asked if there was anything they could do to change my mind. I looked at him and I said, "You already had your chance." He didn't respond to that. I shook his hand, walked out of his office, and spent my last 2 weeks doing my job the same way I had always done it. Quietly, completely, without looking back. Vantage Supply Partners was everything Callaway had stopped being a long time ago. A place where decisions were made based on results, where experience was treated like an asset instead of a threat. I showed up on my first day, met my new team, and got to work. I did not spend time thinking about what was happening back at Callaway. I had made my choice, and I was focused entirely on what was in front of me. But the industry is smaller than people think, and news travels. About 6 weeks into my time at Vantage, my phone rang on a Wednesday evening. It was Gerald Sims. Gerald told me he had filed a formal complaint with the state labor board. His attorney had reviewed the terms of his termination against the company's legacy pension plan structure and determined that cutting him 2 years short of full eligibility, without documented performance cause, put the company in a legally complicated position. I did not give him legal advice. I was not involved in his case in any formal way. But I listened, and I told him I was sorry for what had happened to him, because I genuinely was. Gerald had given 6 years of honest work to that company. He deserved better than what Ryan Callaway had decided his exit would look like. Within the following 2 months, 2 more former members of my team reached out to me. Both of them had left Callaway voluntarily after I did. They were looking for professional references. I gave both of them strong ones because both of them had earned it. The team I had built was quietly coming apart, one person at a time, and there was nothing I could do about that except make sure the people I knew to be good got a fair chance somewhere else. Then Sandra called. It was a Friday afternoon. I saw her name on my screen, and I already had a feeling about what she was going to say. I answered, and she got to it quickly. Meridian Manufacturing was pulling its account from Callaway Industrial Solutions. The decision had been finalized internally, and the formal notice was going out the following week. She told me the specific reasons. In the 6 weeks prior, Callaway had missed 3 separate delivery windows on Meridian orders. 3 times in 6 weeks, after years of near-perfect reliability. The incident that made the decision final was a critical order for one of Meridian's own clients, a production-sensitive shipment that arrived 4 days late because the new vendor check-in system had failed to catch a supplier delay until it was already too late to reroute or recover. Ryan had sent Sandra a personal email afterward. He apologized and offered a pricing discount on future orders. Sandra told me what she had told him in response. She said, "A discount doesn't fix a broken production line." She said it to me the same way she had said it to him. Calm, clear, and final. Sandra Okafor did not raise her voice when she was done with something. She just became very still and very certain. And she was both. The Meridian account was worth $4.2 million annually. It did not walk out the door because of anything I engineered or arranged. It walked out because the operational foundation that had kept it in place for years was no longer there. Reality does not wait for anyone to be ready for it. Within that same month, I heard through 2 separate people in my industry network that Callaway had lost a second client. A smaller account, around $800,000 annually, but significant enough that people noticed. The word moving through the network was that the operations department was struggling to maintain consistency under the new structure. I did not call Dennis. I did not send a message to Ryan. I did not post anything publicly or say anything to anyone that I would not have said with Dennis standing right next to me. I went back to work. I had a department to build. I've had a lot of time to think about all of it since then. Quiet mornings before the rest of the house wakes up. Long drives. The kind of thinking you do when something big has passed and you're far enough away from it to see it clearly. Here's what I know now. Competence does not protect you inside a company that has decided bloodline matters more than performance. I was good at my job. I was very good at my job. And it did not matter because the decision was never about performance. It was about a father who wanted his son to have something and a son who was willing to take it. My results, my relationships, my 9 years, none of that was part of the equation. I had spent a long time believing that if I just kept doing excellent work, the organization would eventually recognize it correctly. That belief cost me years of underpayment and a title I should have held long before I left. The second thing I know is that your real leverage is almost never visible until it's gone. I did not threaten anyone. I did not make demands. I did not negotiate with what I knew. I simply left. And what I had built, the relationships I had maintained, the operational knowledge that existed inside my head and inside the habits of the team I had trained, all of it became visible the moment it was no longer there. Sandra Okafor did not leave because of me. She left because the thing I had built to serve her was broken. That is a different kind of power than most people think about. It is quiet, and it is slow, and it is completely real. The third thing I know is about Gerald and the others. My salary went up $33,000 when I left. Gerald filed a legal complaint just to recover retirement benefits he had already earned. Those are not the same situation. I got a better outcome than he did, and I have not forgotten that. If there's one thing I would change about how I handled those 3 months, it is that I wish I had found a way to protect those people before Ryan got to them. I did not. That stays with me. If I could say one thing to a younger version of myself, maybe the version sitting in a warehouse at 24, just starting to learn this industry from the ground up, it would be this: build your value every single day. Document everything that matters. And never confuse loyalty to a job with loyalty to the people who actually deserve it. Those are not the same thing. I learned that the hard way, but I learned it, and I have not forgotten it since.